Welcome to the world of Rex. I am Marvel Rex here with you today with a very special episode. I'm actually going to be joined today by a fellow astrologer, Vivi Henriette, and we are talking about the April 8th total solar eclipse that's happening this year, 2024. Vivi is our resident Aries in the house for this eclipse. You can learn more about her in the link in the show notes. She has a whole universe called Art of the Zodiac, where you can find her Substack, her podcast, Talk, 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 where she interviews other astrologers and also just brings out incredible information from her own astrological practice. She is a consulting astrologer. So please check her out. You are one of my favorite people, so I'm so excited to be talking with you. We are sitting on this full moon in Virgo, talking now as Mercury just moved into Pisces. So we both have Mercury in Pisces. Let's see how this wild, wacky conversation goes. But please say hello to the audience. Is there anything that I left out?
No, you did a great job. I just want to send my extra gratitude for your Mercury and Pisces. I,
Thank you.
I think just can I just have a moment to talk about this placement just because it's a little bit of a soapbox here?
Please, please.
I really feel that we need to start a coalition because Mercury and Pisces, I think, is one of the most disrespected signatures one can have natally. Like, think about it. If you have sun or moon in a difficult placement, it's like, oh, that must be so hard. You have a benefic in a difficult placement. Oh, Venus and Virgo, I'm so sorry. It must be so hard. You're so hard on yourself. The same thing with the malefics, right? Like
Yeah,
everyone we have compassion for, but it's like Mercury and Pisces is like, oh, you can't think. You must be a good poet. It's like we do other things.
yeah. We do many things. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I would say across the board, most of the astrologers who are very amenable to other placements, anytime Mercury and Pisces is brought up, you're right. It's like the Eeyore energy. It's like, wah, wah, you missed out. Good
Yeah.
luck with your life. Yeah. Well, we both have Mercury and Pisces. I have a unique Mercury and Pisces because it's got that exact Jupiter opposition to the degree. So Jupiter is helping me out in Virgo,
Mhm.
but still, we live mystical lives and we also
Yes.
get stuff done. I mean, that's real. We do get stuff done.
I mean, you
So,
especially, and you should be our spokesperson because yours works maybe arguably better than mine. But, we're not all poets and musicians.
yeah.
We are some of that too.
Yes. And also, just thinking without going down this wormhole so much for because of
Mhm, mhm.
timing, just thinking about Pluto entering Pisces at some point in 2043, I feel like we'll have our moment. I think that there's gonna be some good juicy Mercury Pluto stuff where people are like, "Oh, we needed you the whole time. We're so sorry."
Yeah. Yeah. Waiting for that moment.
Exactly. Yeah. 20 years from now. Okay. Well, so today we're going to be talking about the week of April 8th to April 14th. And primarily, we're talking about the total solar eclipse. This is a huge moment. It's arguably the biggest moment of the year for a lot of astrologers. We all want to be conscious about what's happening during this time, as well as this same week, we've got some Mars Saturn bumping into each other energy. So we'll talk about that. And I'm so curious about your perspective of the whole week for sure. But also, you made a really good point when we were talking in the pre-show about this moment that we're recording in, which is we're recording technically on February 23rd, right as the moon is about to be full in Virgo. Do we want to start here in this moment to get
Yeah.
people ready with the full arc of what's transpiring and how they can also locate themselves in this storyline personally, and then of course we'll talk collectively as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking, well, I'll let you start with your thoughts on the full moon.
Yes. Okay, great. So full moon in Virgo, here we are. We've got there's a major Saturn activation because the moon and the sun are very close. Well, the sun is very close to Saturn, cruising
Mhm.
in, and Mercury is also right now at 1 degree of Pisces, also cruising in. They're gonna have their Cazimi. We're gonna talk about this, but this
Yeah.
full moon is already a Saturn and Pisces activation, so we want to be paying attention. Um, this episode is going to come out, I think, I might just drop it like early. We're gonna have to drop it
Yeah.
early so that everyone's ready. But this full moon is highlighting for us what the Saturn and Pisces work is. And I
Mhm.
would say with the Virgo activation, there can be an overload of information mentally. my big takeaway, and I know it's going to sound a little
Yeah.
broad and vague and Mercury and Pisces, but my big takeaway is how are we rooting into our body right now with those sextiles to Taurus from the Pisces energy and the trines from Virgo? Like, how are we rooting into the body instead of just getting really pulled into the mind? But Saturn is also a sobering reality check, and we're going to get a few of those in a very short period of time. In Pisces, the phrase that comes up to me is always it's like getting sober. Sobriety is always this Pisces. Saturn in Pisces feels like let's create a container around the self undoing, or create a container around where our energy is leaking, or where our, we have this in Pisces, it's like the never ending ocean. But like, what happens if you put some water in a water bottle? Like, you can do a lot with a water bottle. You can like travel through the desert with a water bottle, right?
Absolutely. I was also thinking of putting a container around imagination. I was just looking
Mm,
recently at the birth chart of Jim Henson, who
mm,
has, I believe, Saturn and Pisces, right? Making an opposition to Neptune and Virgo, right?
wow.
And thinking about like one of the most famous puppeteers in the world, right? So
Yes.
there is that sort of harnessing of imagination too.
Yeah, and I love that. The Virgo energy of making it physical, making it
Uh-huh.
tangible, containing the multitudes of Pisces in a way
Yeah.
that is still, I mean, look, Virgo's a mutable sign. Like there's still a lot going on, but it's on the physical plane. It's detail oriented. It's rooted in some form of logic, right? The Virgo logic, which is complicated for me as someone who's very much a Pisces. Although Jupiter in Virgo. So yeah, this moment is, I think, a breadcrumb is what I would say for a lot of folks to be thinking about how are you containing, I would say, your imagination on a positive note? Where are you containing your I would say passion or joie de vivre? Like, how are you containing that? Your dreams? How are you making your
Mhm.
dreams tangible during this time? And then on a more shadow work level, it's about where are certain dreams maybe not in alignment, or are uh, not helpful to the system, or are an escape. I mean, that's the line you're always walking with Pisces, is like, is it a dream, or is it a form of self obfuscation or escape?
Mm.
And parsing those out during this full moon, actually, I think is very helpful. And I always like to remind people that, the full moon is technically happening right around now, but it is playing out for 2 weeks.
It's because you have this sort of baked into your chart,
Yeah.
planets on the Virgo Pisces axis. The question I might ask you is thinking about, I think that the sort of anxiety of Virgo is wanting control, like wanting to prepare and wanting to get all those details. And Pisces is just like you can't hold any of it, right? There's that, and that is the imagination of like it's the land of Jupiter, right? Like this is where we go with our intuition, where we just kind of like understand there's something so much bigger than us that we have no control.
Yes.
And so thinking about, on the other hand, people who are maybe too caught up in that Virgo story might be
Mhm.
kind of like blasted open this time.
Yes. I think you're right, because Saturn's there in Pisces. Saturn's not in
Yeah.
Virgo, right? So
Hmm.
there's this really heavy hitter, dense energy that's sitting in Pisces. And I always say on the podcast, letting go and letting God. I do
Yes.
think that if we're trying to control this, this is such a good point, because also this Virgo energy is in conjunct to all the Aquarius, right? Awkward,
Yeah.
needs to make an adjustment. And I feel like because we're being initiated right now so deeply into a new paradigm, a lot of folks, maybe the desire in feeling that new information is like, oh, I need to control something right now because everything feels out of control. Collectively, of course, we're watching, like, on the collective level, it's very challenging, and there's a lot of shadow, but also individually, where are we trying to find some semblance of control? And I think you're right. This full moon is going to illuminate. That's what full moons do, illuminate where we may be dancing that dance of feeling grounded versus feeling overly fixed or overly fixated, would be a good Virgoan word, is like fixated or OCD
Mhm.
around it's like trying to die on a hill that you don't need to die on. Like, that's, I think sometimes the shadow of Virgo is like, I need to control this thing, and then you look back and you're like, okay, so where where was the use in that? Like, where did that get you, other than maybe stressed out, right? It's a very I've been thinking it's a very just awkward moment right now, because there's so much change in the air, I think, with all this Aquarius. So there's an awkwardness. And when we're in awkward moments, I think humans naturally, we want to feel some level of control, even if it's an illusion. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking of the Virgo energy as the person who spends so much time planning for a trip that they actually never enjoy it.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Totally. I have to say, bless my mother, she listens to this podcast. She has Moon in Virgo. It's very intensely aspected in her chart. And when we traveled with her as a child, she would
Yeah.
try to control, like it was just like this way of we have to go here, and we have to go here, we have to go here. And there wasn't a lot of flexibility around like, can we slow down and like have lunch for 3 hours? It was like, no, now we're going here. And we always, the whole family would just be like, girl, we're it's like we're on a mission right now, but we're supposed to be on vacation. Gotta check all the boxes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, a lot of tension there. Very funny. Yeah. And so this storyline really lines in. I think we should talk about the larger storyline here, which is that we're talking on this full moon in Virgo, but this Saturnian activation that happens, this awareness of like, where am I trying to either hyper control or I'm trying to
Mhm.
undo myself? That's the polarity here, is like I'm either engaged in a behavior that is undoing me, or by like letting go and having no rules,
Yeah.
Pisces,
Yeah.
or you're undoing yourself on the flip side with Virgo, which is trying to hyper control and contain all this brand new Aquarian download energy. All of this is so new. Like, I just have to
Mhm.
really emphasize that all of this is so profoundly new for our bodies, our physical bodies, right?
Yeah.
The vessels. So we're in this tightrope, and I want to hear perhaps like your thought around next week's astrology, right around February
Yeah.
27th, 28th, and how it leads into this eclipse. Like, why are we paying attention to this period of time in late February?
Sure. Yeah. So in late February, we have the rebirth of both Mercury and Saturn. So what this means is on the same day, Mercury and Saturn conjoin the sun, something called cazimi. When a planet joins with the sun, it's said to be reborn. So from that point, Mercury then will start moving into its phase as an evening star, and Saturn will start moving into its phase as a morning star. And so if we look to wherever this axis, the Virgo Pisces axis falls into our chart, we could see a renewal of topics in this part of our lives. And that will become more important when we talk about those eclipses later on.
Yeah. But I want to say that I think the Mercury storyline is going to create a lot of surprising, potentially confusing news, conflictual news. So we want to just be paying attention to not, I would say, piece of advice is not to jump to any conclusions about what your life looks like over these next couple months.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because you mentioned, right, like the Mercury, it's Mercury in Pisces, which is on its way to the start of the retrograde phase, to say,
Yeah.
put that clearly. And first off, we know, as much as I love us Mercury and Pisces natives, overall, it's an unreliable narrator, right?
Yeah.
Like Mercury
Yep.
and Pisces isn't really about the facts.
Yeah.
And so we get this moment of Mercury and Pisces, which is already like tricky new stuff, right?
Yep.
Illusions, things like this. And then it does go retrograde in Aries, which is problematic
That's
because
that's what it
it's
is.
then moves into the point where Aries thinks it's aggressive and it thinks it knows everything.
Yeah. Is it in April that Mercury bumps into the sun? Yes, from an
So
inferior
yeah,
conjunction.
you're
That's
like
what it was.
I'm putting it this way, astro jargon aside, when it hits the sun this time, it starts to make its movement to be an evening star, and
Yes.
then
Boom.
when it does the conjunction um in April, I believe, right? That's when
Yes.
it then it goes from morning star.
Yes. Thank you. Wow,
That's a whole podcast.
I'm getting really grabbed by Mercury and Pisces right now. Definitely. But yes, that's what yes. So there's going to be reversals is what I'm saying. Like this moment, I think, and you're right on it. You're following me here, thank God. Um, there will be reversals. There will be reversals in news, and I think not jumping to conclusions right now for the next couple months is really important, especially with this Virgo full moon energy of like, I know what's happening, or I have a
Mhm.
grasp in maybe reaction to all this new information with the Aquarius energy. I do think that there's a total wild card element all the way until perhaps the summer on the northern hemisphere.
Absolutely. And just something to think about for this the Cazimi that happens at the I believe what, February 27th,
Yeah,
28th, right? So I'm always bring mindfulness to that day, right? When Mercury has this moment with the sun, Saturn's going to have this moment with the sun. Just kind of take a note of what comes up in your life, what news, what people, any of it. Like that's going to be an auspicious time.
I would say yes. I'm going to double down and just let listeners know that February 27th, 28th, pay attention. Like, be extra conscious, particularly like exactly what you said. Mercury is news or information coming
Yeah,
in, right? So pay really close attention to what information's coming in. If you know the Pisces part of your chart, that's very helpful as a layer of information as to what the news could be or what it might look like. And Saturn there, from a Vedic perspective, is like it's karmic news, or like you have to deal with it.
yeah,
You have to grow through this. It may not always be, it can be sobering information right around the 27th, 28th. Usually it's sobering information if we're going to be Jedi mind tricks about it. It's sobering information that ultimately is for your higher good, as long as you're willing
yeah,
to work for it and with it. So the mentality going in should be like, oh, I might have to surrender my ego, humility, Saturn and
yeah.
Pisces. I may have to surrender my ego to receive this information. But there is something I like that you use the word auspicious because I think some astrologers would say it's not auspicious because Saturn's there. But I'm in agreement with you. I don't know if it's all my Pisces, but I'm like, there's something here that feels fated and
Mhm.
active, and it's a conjunction with Saturn. It's not an opposition. It's not a square. Like I feel like even though conjunctions with malefics are malefic, it's there's an opportunity here to grow, and it does require faith. Keyword Pisces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's tied in with this April eclipse because the we're going to have Saturn very active that week, April 8th to the 14th. So, do we want to kind of talk about the eclipse and then fold Saturn in? I feel like that might be the way to go.
I absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Here we go. I love that I'm talking with you as an Aries because this is April to me just feels, even though we enter Taurus season at the end of the month, like April feels like the most Aries because we've got Mercury there retrograde in Aries. I'm like, this feels like I'm entering into a boxing ring, but like I don't know, everyone is unhinged. I'm very curious as to your take around April, like the eclipse, April 8th. So it's happening. To frame for everybody, it's happening Monday, April 8th of 2024 at 2:21 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:21 a.m. Pacific Standard Time at 19 degrees of Aries and 24 minutes. It's conjoined Chiron, and I would call it the biggest eclipse of the year. I wrote psychic surgery, but I'm so curious as to
Mhm.
what your response to this energy is. Yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Well, first off, I think it's important when we think about eclipses for those who may not know, right? That we think about them on two levels, at least I do. There's the mundane. So I think this is going to be big in world events. We can sort of touch on that. And I think that's what you're talking to, this explosiveness there, you know, as far as personal lives go, right? We've had other eclipses in this part of the chart, right? So we had one in April 20th, an Aries eclipse. We had one in October 14th in Libra. Previous to this one in Aries, we'll have one on March 25th in the Libra axis.
Mhm.
So for your own lives, there's already a story. I'm pretty sure you know what it is that's playing out in this Libra Aries axis of your chart, right? That's going to be more pronounced if you have planets there, if it's on an angle. So this isn't completely coming out of surprise when it comes to like to personal events, the world too, but that's another matter. Um, I just had the October 14th fell on my IC MC axis. And so I've been eclipsed, right? Like all the things I moved across country, I changed jobs, like all of it, right? Like, and
Me
that's what
too.
eclipses are. They could be fated endings, beginnings. And so just reminding yourself as we go into this eclipse season, really meditate on what the story is for you, because no doubt you probably have some clue of how this is unfolding in your life already.
Yeah.
Do you agree with
I
that?
love that starting point actually, and we should back it up a little bit and just talk
Yeah.
about Aries Libra, the axis that this is falling on, the
Yeah.
themes of Aries Libra, as well as the fact that you're
Mhm.
right. This activation started in April of last year. So for
Yeah.
folks who are really following their lives on like a calendar level, you can
Yeah.
look back to April of your life. You can look back to October, April of 2023, and October of 2023, particularly the 14th of October, and then it was April 20th of 2023, and ask yourself what was going on in the weeks surrounding that period of time, right? I do
Hmm.
think the Taurus Scorpio eclipses were kind of throwing wrenches in the gears because of Uranus, but and so this
Totally.
year's a little bit more, there's going to be a different tone because we don't have those anymore this year. But we have breadcrumbs. And then with Aries Libra, I always think about the sense of self and the sense of self in partnership on a very simple note, just like Aries being this core identity. We have to talk about Chiron being there, transiting right now, and then Libra being about how am I in contract with other people? How do I actually form bonds? Whether it is romantic or not, really, with Libra, right? And then also on a mundane or global level, it's like war and
Mhm.
peace, war being Aries, peace being Libra. We saw that in October when that eclipse happened on a global level, that really got inflamed. So, yeah, any thoughts about Aries Libra that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it this way, right? I think Aries Libra does have, not that I'm equating house systems, but it does have that like first seventh house feel in the sense
Yeah.
that Libra, I think, is the sometimes, official contracts we have with each other. Sometimes it's the unofficial contracts, right? The contract of our friendship, right? The contract of us as lovers, whatever it is, right? That's Libra. It's like we are in agreement to do this. And I do think of Aries as being the individual. This is the what I need and what I'm going to express before I can even think about it, right? And so I feel in consultation, I've been finding with this eclipses have been bringing up for a lot of people is people have been getting that Aries spark of I need to do this, right?
Hmm.
But once the individual needs to do that, then we need to go back and renegotiate the contract,
Yes.
right? Well, if I need more space, what's my relationship look like? Or if I need to do this, what's our business partnership look like? So there's been a lot of like balancing the individual needs for the relationship. I also want to present a piece. I was thinking about this a lot, thinking about the switches from the eclipses, right? The other thing that we have that's different about this set of eclipses from the last, right? The last April, October eclipses is that Pluto has moved into Aquarius. And so now Pluto is making a whole sign trine to Libra, which feels a little bit of like the collective supporting the individual relationships. I don't know. I feel like there's something there you can mine for me.
I like that a lot, and I wonder my hope because I'm a total utopian. I'm living towards utopia. I'm working towards
Yeah.
utopia of some kind. Like here I am, and I love the whole sign trine point because I do think that Aquarius, Pluto and Aquarius is for the people of the people. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
shadow side, but like that's where I'm gonna land with that.
Yeah.
Collectives, right? And futuristic oriented collectives, future oriented
Yeah.
collectives in a trine to Libra is how can we heal our relationships or go deeper in our relationships and our contracts in a way that's experimental but cohesive or creates cohesion
Hmm.
in new ways. I just had a coffee this morning with a Libra, rising
Yeah.
Libra moon, and he's getting a whole sign trine for the first time in his life to from Pluto and Aquarius to his first house and
Yeah.
his moon. And he was sharing with me that first off, he feels so free. He's like, I'm feeling really
Mhm.
good right now. And I was like, I bet because he's a Gen X, so he has Pluto and in Libra. So he's been having
Yeah.
that square from Pluto and Capricorn. Now it's not happening anymore. Liberation until, September, but liberation. And what he was saying that was so beautiful to your point is that he was like, he and I had this whole conversation about what does it look like when we're creating new social contracts with people that we
Mhm.
consider our enemy. Right? That's so Libra. That's so Libra, I think, from the Libra to Aquarius. So we were talking about
Yeah.
like alt-right people and like liberal people. And we were like, what does it look like if we can all sit down at a table together? And that I think is your point around the trine from Aquarius to
Yeah.
Libra. How can we heal the covert contracts and the overt contracts in a way that actually allows everyone to sit at the same table because we're all human at the end of the day, or we're all cyborg at the end of the day if we're talking about Aquarius, but it's like we're all in this together. And so, how do we create new social rules? I think one on one, experimentally, Aquarius. I
Yeah.
think Aquarius is going to give some room to that so we don't feel so bogged down in traditional relational dynamics.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's something you mentioned in your podcast before. I was thinking about too. It's like, how can the collective start to empower the individual relationships? right? Like
Yes.
thinking about the trine to those feels very important. It does, it feel like, yeah.
And now it makes me think of the internet too, because Aquarius rules the internet, right? And then we have all this new language around on the internet. You've got all this social media dialogue around avoidant attachment, anxious attachment,
Oh
secure
yeah.
attachment, trauma. Like there's a lot of shadow work videos that people can watch. I send my clients to certain YouTubes and I'm like, please listen to this shadow work. Like, please listen to what avoidant. So that's part of what you're saying is Aquarius, the
Mhm.
internet, is empowering people to have more healthy one-on-one relationships right now. I also have to say that like the nodes are ruled right now. North node in Aries, which is where the
Mhm.
eclipses are happening. The
Yep.
eclipse is happening in April. South node in Libra is ruled by Mars and Venus, right? The North node's ruled by Mars. The South node's ruled by Venus right now. Mercury, or sorry, Mars and Venus are conjoined in Aquarius as we're talking. So there's a rebirth. They also pass through Pluto in February. So there's this rebirth around how I am an individual experimentally,
Yeah.
right? We're experimenting with our individuation, and we're
Mhm.
also experimenting with our or shedding light or being radically honest and authentic in our Venus relationships, South Node. I think you're absolutely on the money where people are starting to wake up to who they really are. And now the relationships have to have a domino effect of change. I don't think it has to be all drama. I think the Pluto and Aquarius is like, hey, there is support here. There's support from your community. There's also support by educating yourself and trying new things. I have been doing this in my relationship where I'm like, ooh, this is where we normally get stuck. And instead,
Mhm.
I've been channeling Pluto and Aquarius, slash, I have Mars and Venus conjoined in Aquarius. I've been channeling this new Aquarian energy where I'm like, let's talk about it in like a jokey way, or let's both give each other a compliment in this moment, even though it feels like a very weird time to be giving each other a compliment. Like, let's try that out. And it
Yeah.
like diffuses the like old paradigm Capricorn energy that was really present in my chart. Does that make sense? Like, where it's like, we can't talk about that covert dynamic that we have. Instead, I'm like, let's talk about it, but let's do it in a way that's experimental. Uranus, right? Aquarius.
Oh, I love that. And I love the just the overall focus here on community, whether it be and relation, right? And I was also sometimes thinking the fact that, right, the sun in Aries is going to be obscured. And there's something, I think there's a lot of false narratives around Aries. Someone who has, both Mars and Aries very prominent in my, I'm sorry, Mars and the sun in Aries very prominent in my chart. I think we think of this idea of like the individual, like I can do it alone, right? Or I think that Aries, right? Like there, that idea of the individual is really false. We all need each other. There's no such thing as the person who can do it on their own. And thinking about the larger context of these things is rents are skyrocketing, the world's in sort of a shaky place, right? Now more than ever, we need to realize that we really are all in this together. And I think that dissolving of that individual is really important.
Yes. Thank you for saying that because now I'm realizing the timing of it is very interesting that we're having these eclipses of the with the North Node and Aries, we're having these brand new initiations into individual
Mhm.
nature right as
Yeah.
we're like entering into kind of an Aquarian hive mind. And
Oh,
not to scare people, but it's like it feels kind of like right on the money because eclipses are reboots. And so we're
mhm.
rebooting narratives around individuality in preparation for like advanced technologies, right? Like that's what I'm like, oh, perfect. That makes sense to me that we are being initiated and part of the initiation is, oh, we can't actually do the lone wolf. I'm going it alone. I'm bringing myself up by my bootstraps. And toxic masculinity and patriarchy, these patriarchal notions, they're getting eclipsed. Hopefully in
Mhm.
April, right? I mean, I think definitely in April on a global level. We'll be seeing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that word reboot. That's so good. I'm taking that one.
Yeah, it's a reboot. It is. I think let's talk a little bit on a. I'm always really interested in the personal. So, for how folks who are
Yeah.
listening can work personally for themselves. So, the global is going to be intense, and we can touch upon that later. But I think let's start with I want to hear your thoughts around Chiron being really present, what you would encourage folks to think about somatically, psychologically, psychically feel into in terms of what they can expect around April And of course, let's just presence also following the breadcrumbs of February 23rd, February 27th, 28th, leading up to April. Yeah, what would you recommend for folks to think about in their own personal lives with this energy present?
Yeah, two things. One, I think it's important to remember that the effects of eclipses tend to be long lasting, right? So it's not like on the eclipse something big is going to happen. I mean, it could depending on your chart, but usually there's a narrative that's going to be playing out around that time, and you'll figure it out. Um, but so specifically, just in general, any eclipse protocol, I think eclipses with even without the fact that this one's super activating because it's in loaded in a fire sign. Eclipses themselves can be really jarring. So I always recommend that people be get some good rest, drink lots of water, right? Particularly stay in. I like to sometimes do like a sound bath or go floating or something, like be in water, take like some sort of ritual bath, right? Like, but just be really easy on yourself during the eclipse period, right? Like, I think you had this in the notes. I personally like wouldn't do magic. If you do like moon rituals, maybe like you're kind of fucking with the dragon. So sorry, I swore.
That's okay.
Right? Like, be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, what are your eclipse protocols?
I definitely don't do ritual on eclipses
Yeah.
personally. I don't look at solar eclipses, even though my partner loves that. And she did look at the 2016 or 2017 eclipse. I can't remember. I think 2017. Yeah, she looked at that one. I don't, I'm like, it's not, I don't know if it's my superstition. I'm just like, I'm good. Like, I'm very, very sensitive. And I think that's part of it for me is like, I'm so sensitive that I don't need to look at the thing. I can feel the thing.
Okay.
I'm also ruled by the moon. I'm a Cancer. So, that's my whole deal. In terms of this eclipse in particular, I will totally mirror what you're saying, and I would say that foundational things like food, rest, nervous system regulation is really important because eclipses are a time where people can be more easily dysregulated. Their nervous system
Yeah.
can literally be in fight or flight. With Aries, it's fire energy. So if we're thinking even from an Ayurvedic point of view, it's fire in the body. So it can come
Yeah.
out as angry words, anger. It can come out as like saying the thing that's raw on your mind, but not realizing that it can hurt yourself or another person. There can be an
Yeah.
impetuousness and an impulsiveness to Aries that we really need to watch out for. And Mercury's retrograde. So it's like because Mercury's retrograde in April, I think on the first he stations, so that it's like immediate. It's immediate that we may feel like we need to die on that hill and it's not even a hill. Like we're not even seeing what it is, right? So we're like, this is who I am. I kind of joked in my head around it because I was like, oh, people are going to be very adamant about like, this is who I am in an
Hmm.
unconscious way. And then May comes around and they'll be like, I did not mean any of that. Or I meant a third of that. Or I was really wrong. Like I am so I could also see this as like apology station where everyone's just like apologizing to each other in May. Or depends on your pride. It could be never if you're whatever. I was gonna say Scorpio, but like there may be some people who are not apologizing. But I do
Yeah.
think internally people might say, oh, I was really adamant in April, right around this eclipse, that this was the truth or this was the truth of who I am. And I would say, again, to talk about Mercury, we should wait until May or June before we really land on like who am I now and who am I in relationship now? I think we're gathering pieces, but it's very much work in process, but it's on a high octane level work in process because it's Aries, right? So it's not like Taurus, it's not like we're working with Taurus energy where we're like,
Yeah.
let's take a step here and check that out. And like, is it gonna bring sustainability? Aries is like, I sprinted forward and I didn't see that there was a minefield and like now I'm trying to like not get blown up and but I'm now mad at the person and so it can just turn into a snowball effect very quickly around this time.
It feels like chasing a high. Like, honestly, we're getting all the like Mercury retrograde of just like, and just like on like steroids with the sort of like Aries eclipse, right? It feels like hopping back into bed with a really toxic partner and being like, but it's cool. We're gonna like make it happen this time. And like, it just feels like if you're not careful, just running after the worst dopamine rush.
Yes. Yes. And I would say, because Mars, right, Mars is this like Mars rules Aries, is the
Yeah.
dispositor of this eclipse. Because Mars is near Saturn, Mars rules adrenaline, and at its shadow level, Mars is like, I will cut through the forest like I will just cut through this whole thing and I don't even care. I'm not even looking. But because he's conjoining Saturn this exact week, April 8th to the 14th, I kind of almost think that Saturn's saving, and no, it doesn't sound like it, but like saving us right now. I think the conjunction to Saturn can be like a, no, buddy, you're not going to burn the whole bridge down. You're not going to burn all your relationships down. You're not going to burn everything down. The Mars in Pisces is a spiritual warrior and an artist. On a shadow level,
Yeah.
it could be, like you said, chasing a high. I think that's very literal with Mars
Yeah.
in Pisces, is like you're getting lost in an addiction or self-harm of any kind. I think for folks that are listening to this before this time comes, it's really important to develop awareness around like, how do you behave on a daily level? Is the
Mm.
moment that you feel uncomfortable, do you start to act a bunch instead of sitting with the emotion? Is there a behavior that like, ooh, I need to let that go? Because I think that that can be the reality check around this time as well. I also wrote in the show notes, like, your relationship to anger, I think, is so critical during this period of time. Like
Absolutely.
anyone's relationship to anger, really. How do you navigate anger? And really asking yourself that question and allowing space to investigate that. Really. Because there's one thing about listening to a podcast and being like, I guess I'll think about my anger later. But what does it look like to sit down with your journal or go on a long walk and work with your anger a little bit? So for some folks, they don't have a working relationship to anger, they don't express it externally. It does, anger exists in each of us. Some people have an external relationship or an externalized relationship where they're like, yeah, I get angry. But like across the spectrum, wherever you're at with it, getting intimate with it and becoming more, I would say, more friendly with your anger. I think that's one of the beautiful parts of Aries, is that y'all tend to have some relationship, overt relationship to anger in a way that I think is really sacred. So,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
building on that, right? It feels, you mentioned the anger, but it also feels like, depending on, again, what's happening in your personal chart, because there's so much in Aries, that if you aren't addressing your anger, right, it could show up in other ways. It could show up as inflammation in the body,
Yes.
lack of sleep. Thinking, right, the potential for literally people getting in accidents, right?
Yeah.
I have scars to prove the
Yes.
the head first Aries is a thing. And so that's something to even be aware of as well. Like, what are your practices? Even thinking about, like, whether it's meditation or massage, because this could start to come off. It's not just that you're like bottling it in, it could have physical implications as well.
I completely agree. And you just brought the Taurus medicine in, Jupiter and Uranus, who will be gearing up to conjoin like a week and a half later, week
Yeah.
later, less than a week later. You're right. We need to root it in the body. Yoga, meditation, exercising, but exercising safely. I think you're absolutely right with all this Aries energy. There can be accidents happen with this energy because it's so hot and so fast, right? So I think going slowly and maybe even engaging in exercise that's like more water based. I keep thinking like swimming, or
Yeah.
something that's a little bit less heat in the body, or just more contained where you're not overdoing it. I do think a one way to hack this energy is to
Mhm.
rest a lot
Mhm.
and slow down. And if you can under schedule, I would recommend under
Yeah.
scheduling at least this week, right? Partially because there's a reboot energy, that like the lights are going off and then they're coming back on after the eclipse on the 8th and 9th. And that also internally happens for each of us. So we are also having an eclipse sort of inside of our bodies. We're getting new information about the person that we are as an individual, but also who we are in relationship. That's getting rebooted. And it takes a while for that information to marinate. And if you're trying to do the Aries thing where it's like I'm running around everywhere, keeping busy because I'm feeling all this heat in my body, we can miss the deeper wisdom here, I think, around how we are transforming as individuals and in community to others.
Absolutely. And I think that's good eclipse practice, period, right? In general, on the day of the eclipse, I try to underschedule or try to make extra time for rest and water. I'm like, okay, the lights go out, so do I. Like, take one from nature. There's a dragon in the sky.
That statement, the lights go out and so do I, like that is brilliant. That is such a good eclipse mantra, really. Because it's like let it go. I didn't do that for myself on October 14th, and it was exactly on my moon to the degree. And I got really physically injured because I'm ruled by my moon, the moon's the body, and I got physically injured because I did not take the lights out. So I'm saying that for folks to
Yeah,
really listen and hear that. The energy is going to be even hotter in April than it was in October. Just, energy wise, there's going to be
yeah.
more available energy. I do think, yeah, I would say the whole week if you can, but definitely that day is really powerful to have that. So, yeah, any other thoughts about the eclipse before we sign off today?
Well, the last piece is
Mhm.
just thinking around that time, right? So when we have the eclipse, of course, we know Mercury's retrograde. It stations direct on the North Node, right? So thinking about, right? So even thinking about after the eclipse, we mentioned the Cazimi, right? Coming up at the end of February. Pay attention to what happens in the Pisces part of your chart, right? Mercury maybe giving you some information, stationing direct. It's going to station again in Aries on the North Node. So maybe pay attention to like what that story is. Those are really important, I think, signposts in this
Yeah.
period.
Yes, yes, yes. There's a lot of tricky energy to navigate. I think the more flexible we are during this time in terms of, I'm going to double down and just say the conclusions that we come to, where we're like, this must be my life now. This is my new life. I think we should be really flexible with that and maybe not, we should err on the side rather of, okay, this is really dynamic change energy. Aries is very initiatory. It is about a brand new paradigm. Pluto and Aquarius is a brand new paradigm. They're actually working really well together in a lot of ways. And we have to let go of the things that come from the last 16 years of Pluto and Cap. We're still letting those things go. We can't try to, I mean, just being fixed during this time is going to, I think, lead to inflammation in some way, right?
Absolutely. I got really excited because now we're talking about this. I'm thinking about that, right? That Mercury stationing direct on that North Node, going back into this conversation of what does it mean to be an individual in the time of the collective, right? When Mercury stations, I think we're going to get a lot of information about that, right?
Yeah.
Mercury stations, like walking into a room and being like, okay, like I've had the entire retrograde to think about this. This is the announcement. And
Yes.
so I think that Mercury stationing is actually going to be really important, something to listen to both in your personal life and in the sky.
Yes. Do you have the date for that off the top of your head?
Um,
Yeah, I wonder when Mercury.
no.
I know. I'm like, oh, I love that both of us Pisces are like,
What are dates? What's time? It's the
what's
only way I can bring
time?
myself.
Let's give people the time that they'll. I do
Absolutely.
think that I will say overall, I think, oh yeah, it's April. It's stations. Let's see, I just saw it. April 24th is the station.
Yeah.
And then that's right after that April 20th Uranus Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. I do think
Mhm.
Taurus season, to that point, this was my intuitive thought, and here's
Yeah.
the actual date. I felt like Taurus season, particularly the tail end of Taurus season, so we're talking like May 10th onward, it does feel like that's when the answers start to really congeal. And that's what I would
Mhm.
say for folks. Like, look, there's still going to be more to the story because we have the October eclipses, September and October eclipses.
Yeah.
But I do think that some things can materialize and crystallize in May, late May, mid to late May, where you're like, okay, aha, that was what I needed to learn during this time. This is who I am now. I made these changes and I am able to have these maybe unconscious contracts with other people. They're now conscious, but I don't have to be angry towards them per se. I would also say one other thing at the end here that I'm reading this book called Meeting the Shadow. And it's a
Ooh,
collection of depth psychologists talking about our shadow side. And
okay.
it's all really Libra because it's talking about these unconscious ways that we project and transfer our shadow onto others. And then we're like, it's their fault that this is all happening, right? Giving our power over to the other when it's the unintegrated parts of you that they're really trying to come out into you and integrate into you so that you're actually more empowered as an individual. Aries.
Yeah.
And so I would recommend for folks, first off, Meeting the Shadow. It's a wonderful book and it's a composite of authors. So there's not actually one author. I'll have to see if I can find the editor and I'll link it in the show notes. But
Yeah.
Meeting the Shadow, looking at shadow work in general, what does it mean to work with your shadow? And the shadow is all the parts of yourself that you feel uncomfortable about or maybe aren't even conscious of, but they play themselves out in your relationships, right? So being a detective and being like, oh, that when that person says something, I get really activated. I wonder what that is. It's your shadow, right? Like it's something that wants to be integrated that isn't yet. And I think that April is going to confront us. It's like hyper shadow time, like
Yeah.
hyper shadow, shadow coming at
I
us at
mean,
a.
literally, that's what it is. The lights are being obscured. I was like, "That's so on point."
And so I'm reading this book ahead of time, like, thank God. But like,
Yeah.
I want folks to
Yeah.
be looking into it and really whatever there's a lot of resources online. You don't even really need to get the book. It's like there's so much online around what does it look to investigate the parts of yourself that feel scary, that feel hard to metabolize, and particularly where you have judgment over others, right?
Mhm.
Because it's usually some reflection of some unintegrated shadow within yourself. It's just a blind spot. So I think that'll help us navigate this time as well as all the somatic practices, yoga, meditation, going on long walks, sleeping, getting sleep during this time. So helpful. All right, Vivi, is there anything else that you want to share as we wrap up this episode? And thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for all the wisdom so far. But is there anything else coming up?
I guess the last words is like thinking about particularly the Mercury retrograde piece. I think Mercury retrogrades can be really important times of listening. You mentioned, right, like not coming to conclusions, but also I think that if we just spend them in reflection actively, asking Mercury, what are you trying to tell me? That can actually be an exciting time. So I think there is something to look forward to in all of this and really productively work with.
Beautiful. It's April 1st, the 24th is the full Mercury retrograde. So everyone can mark their calendars April 1st to April 24th. I love what you just said, which is like, Mercury, what are you trying to tell me? Like,
Mhm.
what do I need to review? What do I need to go deeper into? If you know the Aries part of your chart, even the Libra part of your chart, this is very, very helpful. But on a core level, it's about how we are showing up in relationship to others and particularly how we are showing up in relationship to ourselves. We have to do a deep dive during this period of time. And there's a lot of tricky, hot energy. So I would also say to people, the moment that you want to like really react, what does it feel like to hold for 3 seconds? What does it feel like to pause for 3 minutes? What does it feel like to pause for 3 hours before you send the email, before go climb up on the hill to be like, I'm right. Like, what does it look like to pause? I think pausing during Aries season is like so juicy and powerful. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's so juicy and powerful.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been insightful and exciting. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. I am feeling the full moon in Virgo, but it's in my third house, so I'm like tuck, 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 which is what you do.
Yeah,
I am so grateful to be. I feel like we could have another conversation, so maybe we'll do that
we
soon.
do.
And thank you for offering your perspective and being the resident Aries for this Aries new moon, total solar eclipse. We're gonna drop this episode early for everybody so that they have the timeline that we just laid out for folks to marinate on. Okay, thank you, Vivi. I appreciate you so much. For folks who are interested in knowing more about you, we've got the link in the show notes.
Thank
Anything
you.
else to say about your practice or how folks can work with you before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, you can sign up for a consultation, but I interview people with my podcast, Talk, Talk, Talk. So I just interviewed a wonderful writer that you might know, Bet Williams. I'm about to release that episode. I just released an episode with the co-founder of Psychedelics Today. So not just astrologers, I interview all sorts of people. I really want to do an interview with you because I want to dig into your other life as an artist.
Yeah.
So we'll be getting that on the books, I hope.
Yes, I'm here for it. I would love to do that. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Vivi. And thank you to everyone for listening to The World of Rex. You can find out more about Vivi and myself in the link in the show notes. Good luck during this period of time. I'm so excited for everyone to continue to evolve as themselves and in relationship during this time. If you need more support and resources, you can always connect with me or with Vivi or with any astrologer to get some help here during this time. I love each and every one of you, and I will talk to you next week on the World of Rex.